What if I told you that everything you've been taught about being an empath is completely wrong? That your sensitivity isn't a weakness, but actually a rare psychological superpower that only 2% of the population possesses. Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist who mapped the human psyche, discovered something so profound about empaths that it was buried in his private research for decades. This isn't about being too sensitive or needing to toughen up. This is about a neurological reality that makes you fundamentally different from 98% of people walking this planet. Jung called it the wounded healer frequency, an actual energetic signature that can literally transform other people's psychological states just by being in the same room. But here's the terrifying part. If you don't understand what you're carrying, this gift becomes a curse that will slowly destroy you from the inside out. You've probably noticed how people either love you intensely or seem inexplicably threatened by your presence. How you can walk into a room and immediately feel everyone's hidden emotions. How certain people drain your energy while others seem to come alive around you. This isn't coincidence, it's psychology. And once you understand what Jung discovered about your rare empathic aura, everything about your life will finally make sense. The wounded healer frequency, why your trauma became your superpower. Here's what no one tells you about being an empath. Your sensitivity wasn't born from some mystical gift. It was forged in the fires of survival. Carl Jung spent decades studying why certain people develop what he called hypervigilant empathy, and what he discovered will blow your mind. Your empathic abilities aren't random. They're the result of your nervous system adapting to emotional danger during your most vulnerable years. Think about it. You learned to read micro-expressions before you could even read words. You developed an internal radar system that could detect emotional storms before they hit, because your psychological survival depended on it. Your brain literally rewired itself to operate at frequencies that most people can't even access. Jung called this traumatic alchemy, the process of transforming survival mechanisms into sacred gifts. But here's where it gets fascinating. Modern neuroscience has proven Jung right. Dr. Linaren's groundbreaking research on highly sensitive persons shows that empaths process sensory information more deeply in brain regions associated with awareness and empathy. Your mirror neurons, the cells responsible for emotional mirroring, became hyperactive. Your entire nervous system evolved into what Jung described as an emotional antenna. This isn't just psychology, it's biology. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, became extraordinarily responsive to emotional cues. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation, developed enhanced capacity to process complex emotional data. You literally think and feel differently than most people because your brain structure adapted to survive in emotionally intense environments. Jung observed that this neurological rewiring creates what he called the wounded healer constellation. You carry the wounds that taught you empathy, but more importantly, you carry the wisdom gained from transforming those wounds. This is why people feel inexplicably drawn to you. Your aura, yes. Jung believed empaths have an actual energetic field, broadcasts a frequency that says, I understand suffering, and I've learned how to alchemize it into healing. The most mind-blowing part, Jung documented how this empathic frequency operates on quantum levels. You're not just reading body language or vocal tones. You're literally tuning in to what he called feeling-toned complexes, the unconscious, emotional patterns that drive human behavior. You can sense someone's unprocessed grief, hidden rage, or suppressed fear before they've even acknowledged. These emotions exist within themselves. This is why being around certain people feels so exhausting. You're not just dealing with their surface personality, you're unconsciously processing their entire emotional shadow. Jung called this participation mystique, the unconscious identification with others' psychological states. But here's what makes you special. While most people simply absorb these energies and become overwhelmed, true empaths have developed the ability to transmute them. The psychological radar system, how your mind reads people's hidden truths. What if I told you that your empathic abilities work exactly like a sophisticated radar system? But instead of detecting objects, you're detecting the invisible psychological patterns that control human behavior. Jung discovered that empaths operate through what he called energetic archaeology, the unconscious ability to dig beneath people's surface presentations and uncover the emotional truths they're hiding, even from themselves. This process happens in 3 distinct stages that most empaths experience unconsciously. First, there's the energetic scan. The moment you encounter someone, your empathic radar automatically attunes to their psychological frequency. You're reading their micro-expressions, vocal patterns, body language, and something Jung called their archetypal signature, the unconscious roles and patterns they embody. But you're picking up on far more than conscious psychology. You're tuning into what Jung termed the shadow projection field, all the emotions, traumas, and aspects of themselves that they've disowned or repressed. This is why you can often sense that someone is angry before they even realize it themselves, or feel their sadness even when they're putting on a happy face. Stage 2 is unconscious absorption, because your psyche developed to be permeable for survival reasons. You begin absorbing these shadow energies without conscious choice. This isn't voluntary, it's an automatic response that happens below the threshold of awareness. Jung called this the empathic curse. You take on others' emotional material whether you want to or not. This is where most empaths get stuck, and why so many feel constantly overwhelmed. They're walking around carrying not just their own emotional content, but fragments of everyone else's unprocessed psychology. Imagine having a computer that automatically downloads every file from every device it encounters. That's what your empathic nervous system does with emotional energy. But stage 3 is where Jung's research becomes revolutionary. He discovered that advanced empaths don't just absorb emotional energy, they unconsciously process it through what he called the transcendent function. Your empathic nervous system acts like a psychological laboratory, breaking down others' raw emotional material and transforming it into insight, wisdom, and healing potential. This is why people consistently report feeling better after spending time with you, even when you haven't done anything specific to help them. Your aura has literally processed their shadow material and reflected back a more integrated version of their emotional truth. You're functioning as an unconscious therapist, helping people access parts of themselves they've been unable to reach. Jung documented this phenomenon in his private practice. He noticed that certain patients seemed to heal, not just from his therapeutic interventions, but from simply being in the presence of what he called integrated empaths. These individuals had developed the ability to hold space for others' psychological material without being overwhelmed by it. The key difference between empaths who thrive and those who suffer lies in conscious awareness of this process. When you understand that you're operating as a psychological alchemist, you can begin to direct these abilities consciously, rather than being at their mercy. The archetypal magnet effect, why you attract both healers and vampires. Here's the truth. That will change everything about how you see your relationships. Your empathic aura operates like a powerful magnet that draws specific archetypal patterns to you with magnetic force. Jung identified this as one of the most dangerous aspects of empathic sensitivity. You literally broadcast energetic signals that attract both those who come to heal and those who come to feed. Understanding these attraction patterns is crucial, because it explains why empaths often find themselves in relationships with narcissists, energy vampires, and people who seem to need constant rescuing. It's not bad luck or poor judgment, it's archetypal psychology in action. The first archetype, drawn to empathic auras, is what Jung called the wounded child. These are people carrying unhealed childhood trauma, who unconsciously sense your capacity to witness and hold pain. They're magnetized to you because your aura promises the unconditional acceptance they never received. The problem is, they often want you to become the parent they never had, which creates an impossible dynamic where you're expected to heal wounds that aren't yours to heal. Next is the shadow projector. Individuals who've disowned parts of themselves and unconsciously seek empaths to carry their rejected emotions. They'll dump their anger, sadness, or fear onto you because it's easier than facing these feelings themselves. Your empathic nature makes you the perfect repository for their psychological garbage, and they'll resist any attempt you make to hand it back to them. Then there's the energy vampire, Jung's term for people whose own empathic development was stunted, so they've learned to survive by feeding on others' emotional energy. These psychological parasites have developed sophisticated strategies for triggering your caretaking instincts. They create endless crises, position themselves as eternal victims, and make you feel guilty for having boundaries. But Jung also identified positive archetypes that are naturally drawn to empathic auras. The conscious seeker recognizes your aura as a mirror for their own growth. These people come not to take but to resonate and co-evolve. They're doing their own inner work and can match your emotional depth with their own psychological development. There's also the authentic self archetype, people who are ready to embrace their full humanity and are drawn to the permission your aura gives them to feel deeply without shame. These relationships are mutually nourishing because both people contribute to the energetic exchange. The danger lies in what Jung called archetypal confusion, when empaths can't distinguish between those who come to heal and those who come to feed. Your aura attracts both types, but without conscious discernment, you'll exhaust yourself trying to transform people who aren't ready for transformation. Jung observed that unconscious empaths often become trapped in what he termed savior complexes. You feel responsible for healing everyone who's drawn to your empathic field, not realizing that some people are attracted to your light specifically because they want to dim it. They unconsciously recognize that your consciousness threatens their unconsciousness, and they'll work to pull you down to their level rather than rise to meet yours. The solution Jung proposed was developing archetypal discernment, the ability to quickly identify which archetypal pattern someone is operating from and respond appropriately. This doesn't mean becoming cold or closed off. It means recognizing that your empathic gifts are precious resources that should be shared consciously, not depleted unconsciously. The collective unconscious connection, why you feel the world's pain. This is where Jung's research becomes truly mind-bending. You're not just processing individual emotions, you're connected to what he called the collective unconscious, a shared psychic space containing all of humanity's experiences, fears, and aspirations. As an empath, you serve as what Jung termed a collective antenna, unconsciously tuning into the emotional frequencies of entire groups, communities, and global consciousness patterns. This explains why you might feel inexplicably sad during world tragedies you haven't even heard about yet, or why you feel anxious during periods of collective upheaval. Your empathic aura is literally picking up on archetypal energies that transcend individual psychology. You're sensing what Jung called the collective shadow, humanity's unhealed traumas, suppressed emotions, and disowned aspects of consciousness. Jung believed that empaths play a crucial evolutionary role as early warning systems for collective shadow eruptions. You can feel social tensions, environmental crises, and psychological disturbances before they manifest in the physical world. This is why sensitive people often report feeling unsettled before major world events. Your empathic radar is detecting disturbances in the collective psychic field. But this connection comes with a massive challenge. Jung warned about what he called psychic inflation when empaths take on responsibility for healing wounds that belong to all of humanity. You might find yourself feeling overwhelmed by global suffering, environmental destruction, or social injustice to a degree that feels debilitating. This isn't personal weakness, it's your empathic system responding to collective trauma. The key insight Jung provided is learning to distinguish between personal and collective material. When you feel sudden waves of emotion that don't seem connected to your personal experience, you're likely picking up on collective frequencies. The solution isn't to shut down your sensitivity, but to develop what he called conscious containment, the ability to feel collective emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Jung discovered that empaths, who learn to work consciously with collective energies, become powerful agents of social healing. Instead of being crushed by the weight of global suffering, they learn to transform these energies just as they do with individual emotional material. They become what he called collective alchemists, helping to process and transmute humanity's shadow content. This is why so many empaths feel called to healing professions, social justice work, or environmental activism. You're responding to a deep archetypal calling to serve collective healing. But Jung emphasized that this service must come from wholeness, not woundedness. If you try to heal the world from your own unhealed trauma, you'll burn out and become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. The most fascinating aspect of this collective connection is what Jung called morphic resonance, the idea that when you heal something within yourself, it creates ripples that affect the entire collective field. Every empath who transforms their wounds into wisdom makes it easier for others to do the same. You're not just healing yourself, you're contributing to the healing of human consciousness itself. The sovereign healer transformation from wound to wisdom. This is where everything changes. Jung's ultimate discovery about empathic auras was that they're designed to evolve from what he called wounded healer frequency to sovereign healer frequency. This transformation represents the completion of the empathic journey, the point where your gifts become tools of conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. The wounded healer operates from scarcity, constantly giving their energy away in an attempt to heal others as a way of healing themselves. The sovereign healer operates from abundance, offering healing presence without depleting their own life force. They've learned what Jung called conscious empathy, the ability to feel with others without losing themselves in the process. This transformation requires what Jung considered the most important psychological work: integrating your shadow. Every person you attract who drains your energy is showing you something about your own unconscious patterns. The people who can't receive your love are reflecting your own struggles with self-love. The energy vampires are mirroring the ways you vampire your own energy through self-criticism and perfectionism. Jung's method for achieving this integration was what he called active imagination, consciously dialoguing with the different parts of your psyche to understand their origins and transform their expression. This means facing the wounded child within you that believes you're only valuable when you're helping others. It means confronting the shadow aspects that you've disowned and projected onto others. The alchemical process Jung outlined involves what he called conscious suffering, the willingness to feel your own wounds completely so they can transform into wisdom rather than remaining as open wounds that others can exploit. This isn't about wallowing in pain, but about having the courage to face your unhealed material directly. When you complete this inner work, something remarkable happens. Your empathic aura shifts from broadcasting available for healing to radiating wholeness and integration. Energy vampires naturally fall away because your frequency no longer matches their parasitic needs. Instead, you begin attracting what Jung called individuated souls, people who've done their own shadow work and can meet you at your level of consciousness. The sovereign empath can walk into any room, feel everything that's happening energetically, and choose consciously how to respond. They're no longer at the mercy of their empathic gifts, they're the master of them. This doesn't make them cold or distant. In fact, conscious empathy is far more powerful than unconscious empathy because it serves love rather than fear, consciousness rather than compulsion. Jung believed that empaths who achieve this level of integration become what he called consciousness bridges, living examples that it's possible to feel everything and remain whole. Your transformed aura becomes a healing field that naturally activates growth in others, not through effort or energy expenditure, but simply through the frequency of integrated wholeness you embody. The world desperately needs empaths who understand their gifts as Jung did, not as burdens to be endured, but as sacred abilities to be consciously directed. Your sensitivity isn't too much. Your empathy isn't weakness. Your rare aura isn't a curse. It's a bridge to consciousness that humanity needs to evolve beyond its current level of unconsciousness and separation. Remember Jung's final insight: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For empaths, this means transforming your wounds into wisdom, your sensitivity into sovereignty, your empathy into conscious choice. Your journey from wounded healer to sovereign healer isn't just personal transformation, it's your contribution to the healing of human consciousness itself. The energetic protection protocol, Jung's secret techniques for empathic mastery. Here's what Jung never published in his mainstream work, but documented extensively in his private journals: specific techniques for what he called psychic hygiene, protecting and maintaining your empathic aura while engaging with an unconscious world. These aren't New Age visualizations or feel-good affirmations. These are psychological tools based on decades of clinical observation and Jung's own personal practice as a highly sensitive individual navigating a world full of projection and unconscious shadow material. Jung understood that empaths need daily energetic maintenance, the way athletes need physical training. Your empathic gifts are sophisticated instruments of consciousness that require conscious care, or they'll be contaminated by the psychological debris you encounter daily. The problem is, most empaths are walking around energetically naked, absorbing everyone else's emotional toxicity without any protection or clearing protocols. The first technique Jung developed was what he called the daily energetic audit. Every evening, he would systematically review his energy levels and emotional state, asking himself, what am I carrying that isn't mine? This isn't about paranoia or hypervigilance, it's about developing what he termed energetic literacy, the ability to distinguish between your authentic emotions and the psychological material you've absorbed from others. Jung discovered that most empaths carry an energetic cocktail of other people's unprocessed emotions without even realizing it. You might think you're having a bad day when you're actually carrying your coworkers' suppressed anxiety, your partner's unexpressed anger, or even collective grief from global events. The energetic audit helps you identify and release these foreign energies before they contaminate your authentic emotional state. His second revolutionary technique was archetypal invocation, consciously calling upon different aspects of your psyche to handle challenging energetic situations. When dealing with energy vampires, Jung would invoke what he called the warrior archetype, not for aggression, but for unshakable boundaries. When processing collective trauma, he would call upon the wise elder for discernment and perspective. When facing projection or attack, he would embody the sovereign archetype for centered authority. These aren't fantasy role plays, they're ways of accessing different neural networks and psychological resources that exist within your own consciousness. Jung understood that empaths often get stuck in the caretaker or wounded child archetypes, but you have access to the full spectrum of human psychological resources. Learning to consciously shift between these archetypal states gives you incredible flexibility in how you respond to energetic challenges. But Jung's most powerful technique was what he called energetic aikido, the ability to redirect others' projections without absorbing them. When someone tries to dump their emotional toxicity on you, instead of taking it on or pushing it away, you learn to let it flow through you like water through a screen. You can acknowledge their pain without becoming enslaved to it. You can offer compassion without taking responsibility for their healing. This technique requires what Jung called conscious compassion, feeling with others while remaining centered in your own truth. You develop the ability to say, I can see that you're in pain, and I have compassion for your struggle, but I'm not going to carry your pain for you because that wouldn't actually help either of us. This isn't coldness, it's the highest form of love, because you're refusing to enable their unconsciousness. Jung also developed what he termed the mirror reversal technique. When you notice someone projecting their shadow onto you, calling you too sensitive, too emotional, or trying to make you responsible for their feelings, you consciously reflect their projection back to them through your energetic field. Instead of absorbing their judgment, you become a clear mirror that shows them exactly what they're trying to avoid in themselves. This often triggers what Jung calls shadow projection anxiety in unconscious people. They may become more aggressive, or try harder to make you absorb their disowned material. But when you maintain your mirror-like clarity, they're forced to either face their shadow or remove themselves from your presence. Either outcome serves consciousness. The most advanced technique Jung practiced was collective energetic service. Once you've mastered individual energetic protection, you can consciously offer to transmute collective shadow material, but only from a place of overflow, never from depletion. This means deliberately tuning into collective trauma, fear, or anger with the intention of processing it through your integrated consciousness and radiating back healing frequencies. Jung believed this was the ultimate purpose of empathic gifts, to serve as conscious processors of humanity's shadow material. But he emphasized that this level of service is only possible when you've completely mastered your own energetic sovereignty. Attempting collective healing work before achieving individual integration is what he called empathic martyrdom, destroying yourself in service of others, unconsciousness. The key to all these techniques is what Jung called energetic choice. Instead of being at the mercy of your empathic sensitivity, you learn to consciously direct it. You choose when to open your empathic field and when to close it. You decide which energies to process and which to deflect. You determine how much of yourself to give and when to pull your energy back. This level of empathic mastery transforms you from what Jung called a psychic sponge into a consciousness lighthouse. Your aura becomes a beacon of integrated wholeness that naturally elevates others without depleting yourself. People still feel your empathic gifts, but now they experience empowerment rather than dependence, inspiration rather than rescue. Jung's final insight about energetic protection was that it's not about building walls, it's about becoming so energetically sovereign that nothing unconscious can stick to you. When you're operating from complete authenticity and integration, other people's projections simply bounce off your aura like arrows off armor. You become what he called psychologically bulletproof, not through hardness, but through transparency and wholeness. This is the ultimate empathic mastery. To remain completely open and sensitive while being absolutely unshakable in your center. You can feel everything without being overwhelmed by anything. You can love everyone without losing yourself to anyone. You can serve consciousness without sacrificing your own well-being. This is what Jung called the empathic paradox, achieving maximum sensitivity through maximum sovereignty.